I'm on. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Robert.
Thank you. We're talking about the eternal presence of now. Eckhart Tolle made famous that conversation a few years ago. He's still there. He's still on the circuit. He's still doing well, in my opinion. And you know how you kind of go back and revisit things? And this week I was looking at why is there so much suffering in the human world? You know, if you take a look at it, politically we can't get together. Health-wise, there's more diseases now than there were before. Maybe because we now keep track of statistics, we're in that game. Politically, everywhere, can't get things together. You look at how many wars are there on the planet. So what in the world is going on? And why is this occurring? Especially when we're told we're all children of God. And that's in all religions. In looking for that spark that's there in all religions, what are we here to do? We're here to return to the Father, which is the metaphor in the prodigal son. Returning to who we really are. Okay? So I really believe the presence of now. The only thing we have is now. And it's a difficult thing to really, really address because our minds are going 100 miles an hour. Anybody familiar with the monkey mind? And it goes, yeah. Okay? And it's like, try to stop it. You know, the example is, I want you to think of an elephant, but think of a pink elephant, right? So everybody got pink elephant? So change your mind. And see, the only way to change it is think about a gray elephant. So learning to control the mind is not an easy thing. And we know one of the basic principles is what you think about, you create. Simple. Okay, and the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, which is subconscious mind, so is he or she. So it's been through that whole area. Now quantum dynamics says that our thinking affects the outcome of the atoms and energies and how they travel. So everything keeps piling on top of everything, that we are an energy source. We receive energy and we transmit energy. And in that process, the world is created around us. There are people now talking about the morphogenic energy field, which is that field of our beliefs. So when I walk around, my belief energies are transmitting out, creating the world I believe. Okay? So it's really fascinating that now science is coming in with these new ideas, which then dovetail with what Jesus was trying to tell us 2,000 years ago. So as a Christian spiritual community, I use that term spiritual community because religion is just doctrine and dogma. It's not spiritual, in my opinion. It's here's how I should act as a human being, rather than here I should act as a spiritual being on a spiritual path. And it's very interesting. The reason I got started on this thing, I look at the daily word for the day and wonder, wow, what am I going to do with that? But the daily word today was in Romans 8. And I'd like to go into the Bible. Everybody ready? Bible says. I need to put my glasses on to get that straightened out. By the way, those of you who knew that anybody's liable to stop me at any time. Okay. So Romans 8. And it says here, therefore now no condemnation to them who are in Christ Jesus. Now we know the term Christ was not Jesus' name. The term Christ is that place within each one of us where the seed of God is. It's better to call it Jesus the Christ. His name at the time was Yeshua ben Joseph, which meant Joseph, Jesus, son of Joseph. Okay, so that's his correct title. And the Christ is the Christos from the Greek word light, Christos, which meant the inner light within us, which each one of us has. So Jesus the Christ is really a title of what he had become. Everybody there? So we need that definition in place. And it's a definition that's true. Now the term Christ didn't come in until later, because they were speaking Aramaic in its root language, and Greek came in later as the trade language. So when Paul started his journeys out into let's call them the diaspora Jews who had traveled. Anybody familiar with traveling? In other words, from the United States, I have family everywhere. Anybody else? And that similar kind of thing happened at that time, so that was Paul. So that's when the Greek language came in, which was after the life of Jesus. So, it says here, and it goes on, it says, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. So again, you're dealing with a group of people 2,000 years ago. They were uneducated. Okay, they didn't read and write that well. That's why there were specific scribes and there were specific priests that had the knowledge that they passed on orally. Okay? So understand that this is being passed on orally in metaphors, in similes, and in things today that might not make sense today, that made sense 2,000 years ago. One of the issues that happens is idioms. That's an example I use all the time. Can you imagine somebody trying to translate what hot under the collar means 2,000 years down the road? Or I'm behind the 8 ball? Or what are some others?
Lend me your hand.
Lend me a hand. Could you imagine that? see, and it's completely out of context of its meaning. And that's why we've tried to translate those idioms into today's English. It doesn't work. It's like being born again. Being born again was an idiom that meant change your thinking from your old thinking to your new thinking. Last week we talked about motherhood and the change that occurs at birth. Anybody agree once a baby's born, that's it? And things have shifted dramatically. So now we're having a new outlook on life. So the metaphor is very appropriate. When you leave the physical world and start going on the spiritual path, it's a whole new way of being. In other words, there's nobody out there doing anything to me. All there is me as a child of God creating my world, and I made a few errors. And so the great thing is to forget myself, bless everything that's involved, and go right on. So it's totally different context than this mystical understanding of being born again. And in a context, when I learn to let go and rely on let's call it a superior energy, it is being born again, if you can understand it in that context. So he is saying here, we have to leave the flesh and enter the Spirit. Everybody there? Enter the flesh, leave the flesh behind, and enter the Spirit. And that goes on here. It goes on into Romans. Okay, and it says down in, let's see, I find all kinds of things here. But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. So it's the Spirit of God that dwells in you. Now the problem is we've forgotten that. Okay, that's a big issue. It's interesting. Epigenetics, which is another new study in the biological and DNA studies, have found that our thinking changes our DNA. Okay, now this is a huge scientific understanding because we've been told DNA cannot change. But there's a whole new thing of science known as epigenetics that says when you have a really emergency crisis type thought, it's implanted in your DNA and your DNA changes forever unless you change it back. So can you imagine? The Bible does say we have to deal with the sins. Sins, by the way, is translated much better as errors in thinking, okay? So can you imagine the Bible saying that we have to deal with the error thoughts back 5 and 6 generations? Does it say that? Yes. Okay? So here we are. We've got to deal with my great-great-great-grandfather's upset about, I don't know, the Revolutionary War, whatever it is. And
Cold oatmeal.
Cold oatmeal, yeah. You know, all this stuff. So we are overcoming thousands of stored subconscious DNA tracks to return to our spiritual self, which is the parable of the prodigal son. Because we are the prodigal son returning to the Father. And when we return to the Father, there is that spirit within us that knows how to handle things, but we've forgotten. So, if I take that and translate it into now, when I'm thinking now, would you agree I leave the past behind? Okay? So, the law of attraction says what I'm thinking, I create. So if I'm thinking about the past, what am I creating tomorrow? What I experienced in the past, yes or no? I mean, you got to stick with the logic bit, and we'll get into spiritual stuff later. But right now, it's a logical, scientific fact that what I think about, I create. So if I'm busy worrying about that next door neighbor that did this to me, or my special partner that didn't give me love, or whatever it is, what am I creating more of? What I don't want. Now, here's about, I was looking at this whole issue, because if I go back 6 generations, I got to deal with 6 generations plus all my junk for the last 70 years. So do you see how it's all piled up? I don't know where I just got that from. I just saw a big pile of stuff. It's kind of like, ooh. But you see that process we're working on, and if you take it from a strictly feel-good, in other words, religion is there to make us feel good. It's like a pat on the back, somebody wash your face off and you feel better. But the truth is, we're talking about transition to a new way of life, not just feeling better, changing my life completely so that I influence those around me in a more positive way. Okay? And it's not outside. See, I don't know where this is going, but I got all kinds of thoughts going in. Oh, yeah. But you see, what has happened is, we have taken the old Jewish tradition of sacrifice. That you had to sacrifice a lamb, you had to sacrifice a goat, whatever it was, and blood had to be spilled. Do you hear that? That's an ancient, I want to say falsehood, but it's kind of like, where in the world did the idea of spilling blood come from remission of sins? Whose thought was that 5,000 years ago?
Scapegoat.
The scapegoat, yeah, that's exactly right. So here we are with a doctrinal that I was raised in and feel guilty for a long time because I wasn't in that category, and I never felt comfortable. Because how can a God of love create problems for somebody that doesn't love? It makes no sense. So this started making sense to me that at my core, let's go back 8 generations, back to a whiteboard with no thoughts on it. That's my spiritual self way back there. But that's who is there at your core. You are a child of God. Bible says you're a child of God. And in that, it says by grace are you saved by faith. You don't have to do anything. It's already there. Everybody there? So at the soul level, we are perfect. And we don't have to change anything. We just have to unchange. What the world has told us is true. Everybody there? And how we do that. That's what prayer is for. Now, prayer is not asking God for anything. The Bible says he already knows. Yes, he or she, whatever it is. So he already knows. So what do we have to do? Contact God. And say, hi. Now, is it that simple? I believe it is. Because it's a conscious connection that we make, and we have to learn, we have to practice and learn how to do it. So here we are learning to practice today. Okay? No guilt. My Bible says you're perfect and whole just as you are. We go into the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, the love chapter. It talks about love is all there isn't anything else. And in this process, then, love must be the energy that drives the universe. So what is the corrective energy we need to tap into? Got to be love, yes. Because when I tap into hate and revenge and anger and politics and those jerks on the other side, and that neighbor who's messing with my fence and their dog did this on my front lawn and all that kind of stuff, what are we doing? We're creating more of dogs on my front lawn, just to be inelegant, if I can use that. See, and the idea is, and I'm aware of what I want to do is create pictures and help people make the transition from the physical world and the belief in the physical world into the spiritual world. And as a group, we're creating miracles in the spiritual path. So everybody take a deep breath. That's where we are. Okay? Now, there's a little bit more here. Okay? Someday, do you think we can get rid of glasses? Hold on. The kingdom of heaven is within, right? Okay. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ, is so that we suffer with him. And suffer is generally act with him. So we are joint heirs. To what? Okay, what are the characteristics of God? God is everywhere present, under all conditions, under all situations. God is all power. There isn't any other power other than God. The only thing we identify in unity is that there isn't an evil power. All there is the absence of God, if you can use that terminology, because it's like heat. There is not heat and cold. Everybody there? There's only heat and absence of heat. The AC condition, they'll tell you that the way to cool things down is take heat out.
But that absence can only be right here, right?
What? Say that?
That absence can only be right here.
That's right. So it's an absence on our personal thinking. Okay? And it's a belief in evil is what it is. Because if I believe that evil exists, it's what I'm creating. The law of attraction says I'm creating evil. So if I make the connection directly with God in love, and I stay focused there, that's when things start working. Okay? And the only way to find that out is to do it. That's why we're teaching centering prayer, which is learning how to be silent for 20 minutes at a time. Which sounds easy, but anybody agree it's not? Because the monkey mind wants to keep you awake. Okay? Now, we can go on and on. I've got here practical metaphysics. The group's still meeting on Sunday morning, by the way. Still coming up with good stuff. And here's this idea. This is right from Eric Butterworth, his latest book, which is written, actually was transcribed from one of his workshops by Mark Hicks. We need to get into the consciousness of oneness with God. I'm going to say it again. We need to get into the consciousness of oneness with God. See, we are children of God, joint heirs with God. Okay? Anybody here had a mother and father? Okay, did you inherit everything that was with your mother and father? Yes. In a very practical, physical sense. Spiritually, we have been told that we're children of God and joint heirs with Christ. So what do we inherit? Everything that God is. And what is God? God is all power, God is all knowledge, God is all presence. Period. Okay? So, what do I have to do? Make a connection with God in love. So, let's go on. Turn on. See, but if you, let's see, God, it is not a matter of trying to get God into us, but of you and I getting into the awareness of that which is already present, which is the conversation. See, our subconscious minds have been overridden with all this negativity. Be careful, do this, do that. Okay? So it becomes uncomfortable when we hear the truth. Okay? Let's go on. Let's see. Consciousness is the key. We live in divine mind. So we're not just attracting divine mind in, we are already divine mind. Okay? See, you don't have a mind that is separate and apart from the infinite. If you think you do, it's an illusion. Your mind is an activity within the divine mind. So the idea that we are one, we are all the divine mind thinking into manifestation, that which is our part to bring into manifestation. Okay, now we can go on and on, but it's great stuff. It says here, and this is kind of like what I want to end on, because I spent years training. My first introduction to all this stuff way back when was with, Catherine Ponder, thank you, and Think and Grow Rich. And Think and Grow Rich on page 19 has a paragraph that you memorize and repeat over and over and over again. So the whole idea of the metaphysical interpretation is to take an affirmation and keep repeating it until it becomes part of your consciousness, which means you're overriding the scripts in your head. Well, if you really stop and think about it, the scripts for perfection are already there, so why are we overriding that which is not necessary to be there? We just let that go and allow who we really are. Then it goes on and says, so it says here, truth demonstrates itself. The deed is to know the truth and identify with truth. Okay? And it will demonstrate itself. You go on here, and you don't have to create the good life. You really shouldn't even try. Now that phrase was a little bit, oh my goodness, what's he talking about? Then he goes on to say, the meaning is to unfold the good life. Do you hear the nuance there? So the nuance is, if I'm on the spiritual path, the good life unfolds. And things start happening and miracles occur spontaneously. I've been waiting. Here comes somebody. Go ahead, Valerie.
So this morning's, well, for a couple of weeks now, we've been dealing with the spoken word.
Yes.
And the power of the spoken word. And this morning, one of Eric's thoughts was, the key is listening.
Yes.
And tuning in.
Yes.
See what your consciousness is really reflecting at the deepest possible moment. Remember, there's always a divine mind counterpart within you to anything that you experience.
See, in divine mind is already there. And see, that's the truth. See, you're already a child of God. It's already there. The seed is there. And it's just a matter of conditioning, allowing the soil that's there to grow into who you are. He goes on and says here, again, you need to not reprogram your mind. As a matter of fact, to attempt to program your mind, in most cases, means trying to put something into your mind rather than allowing your mind to share God's choice with you. So, it's very interesting. It really is. And the note I wrote to myself as I was sitting here was this. It's a programming versus unprogramming. Release the truth code that has been covered over and written over by the physical code of the ego and allow your spiritual self to come forth.
Hey, Robert.
So that's where we're here.
And listening to
Hi, Barbara. Cheryl.
Hey, in those tapes that Rick and I have been listening to.
See, here's what's happening, folks. We're doing everybody's doing all kinds of study. They're in Abraham Hicks. Go ahead.
And what Abraham says to that is that it's not the going in and trying to do things, it's creating the feeling, the vision, all of that in your mind and feeling it so strong that life can do nothing else but present it to you. So it's not in the planning and the details.
Yep.
That really you just let go of all of that and your focus is really on creating the feeling of that, the picture of that in your mind.
And that's the difficult part, to let go. For me, years of training and running companies and things, it was like, how do you not plan?
Yeah, it's totally different.
Oh my God, it's sacrilegious.
But
Okay,
it's
and
almost
yes, we
freeing,
plan.
though, in some ways
Yeah.
too, because I can I can feel it, I can see it, I can get
Yeah.
so excited about it, I can talk about it, and then the life will present it.
Yeah,
Universe will
and here it
present
is, and you're in that type of function where you need to plan all the time. Patrick.
So yesterday, I had the
Yesterday.
radio on, the spiritual source of the radio, heard this song by Ray Wiley Hubbard, who does Up Against the Wall. Anyway, he says in this song, I know it's going to be a good day when my gratitude exceeds my expectations.
Yes.
Woo, yeah,
See that's that being in the present. And if I'm in the present, I'm listening to the world around me. And by the way, it helps to pet a dog or a cat if you got to do that, or listen to music, or listen, whatever it is, brings you into the moment, and then stay there. And the idea is, how long can I sustain my spiritual self? So that's what we're up to. Isn't it neat? And I appreciate you. I love you dearly. It's kind of like, wow, I've got at least another hour to talk about. I'm going to shut up. Tommy's sitting there, and he threatens me every week. And I love him dearly. Okay? So,
Your notes again?
What?
Your last note that you wrote, you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you put it in your next email?
it was real simple, and I wrote it while I was here. Release the truth code that has been covered over within you and written over by the physical code of the ego. In other words, the ego is saying we have to be cool, we have to stop it. Now there's certain rules that keep us going, but who says you have to do X, Y, Z? And it's the cultural. And then we have all these arguments over you should believe this way, no, you should believe this way. but they're all man-made codes that are overridden who we really are at our core.
When you say release, you mean let it express?
That could be part of it, yes. Because it's like when one of the keys is learning how to allow upset to come through, to be expressed. Because if we stuff it, it stays.
Well, you say release the truth code.
Release the truth code, yes. In other words, allow it to be
Yeah.
and don't deny it. Sometimes we have, anybody familiar with crazy ideas? And sometimes that crazy idea is there to push us to a higher level of being. So thank you for whatever that is, okay? So let's get excited. Let's have some fun.
Oh, my idea.
Am I finished? I love you guys.